bells are ringing, and the whole village seems to echo with their sound. They toll from the crooked church tower, iron tongues striking against ancient bronze, a noise that is meant to signal joy, but to you feels like a hammer against your chest. You stand at the edge of the churchyard, the smell of trampled grass and muddy boots rising around you, your hands clammy though the morning is cool. Faces turn toward you, neighbours, kin, strangers, all drawn by the spectacle. Some are genuinely smiling, others smirking, all of them invested in what this day represents. Not your happiness, not your love, but the sealing of an arrangement, a transaction disguised as a ceremony. Your stomach knots tighter with each peal of the bells, because you did not choose this day, this spouse, or this destiny. You are a participant only in the sense that a lamb participates in its own slaughter, present but without agency. The decision was made long before now, over tables where bread and ale accompanied whispered negotiations, where the clinking of cups marked your fate as firmly as any spoken vow. A lord weighed the worth of your dowry against the land your family could gain, or a priest confirmed that the match was permissible under canon law. Perhaps even your parents spoke of suitability, of security, nodding gravely as though these words were synonymous with happiness. You were there but not truly included. Now, as you stand with the church looming in front of you, your role has finally arrived. You are to walk forward, to kneel, to speak the words taught to you, to smile as though this union were your will. Behind you, whispers rustle like dry leaves. The villagers speculate about the feast to come, the wealth on display, the alliance forged. To them, you are not a person but a symbol, proof of your family's ambition or humility, depending on who they are. To them, the day is festive. To you, it is a narrowing tunnel. The bride, or the groom, depending on which role you occupy, is someone you barely know. Perhaps you have met a handful of times, each under watchful eyes where words were polite, cautious, stripped of honesty. You know enough to recognize their face, but not enough to imagine sharing a life. Maybe they are older by decades, with grey in their hair and wrinkles around their eyes. Maybe they are scarcely older than you, trembling with nerves that mirror your own. Either way, it does not matter. Consent is a luxury for others. For you, it is irrelevant. You remember childhood days when marriage was only a story, a distant concept wrapped in songs and tales. A princess rescued, a knight pledging loyalty, a feast of love. You thought then that weddings were about affection. How wrong that was. Now, standing in the mud outside the church, you see it for what it is. A contract written on your body, a promise enforced not by desire, but by obligation. Your name is not yours anymore. It is a link in a chain, binding one household to another, one estate to another, one dowry chest to one ambition. The priest emerges, robes swaying, his expression a mixture of solemnity and calculation. He holds the authority of God, or so you are told, but he also holds the authority of law, ensuring that no consanguinity bars the match, no secret vows invalidate the union. His eyes skim across you without warmth. You are one more ceremony in a long career of ceremonies. He sees not your fear, but the orderliness of canon law being satisfied. The church requires its blessing for legitimacy, and legitimacy is what the families crave, because illegitimacy taints inheritance, divides land, breeds chaos. To the priest, you are a safeguard against sin and scandal. To yourself, you feel more like a sacrifice laid before the altar. Inside, the air is heavy with incense, dust motes swirling through shafts of light. Wooden pews creak under the weight of villagers who lean eagerly to watch. Flowers are strewn along the aisle, their fragrance mixing with sweat and candle smoke until it makes you dizzy. At the front, your spouse-to-be waits, and the sight of them tightens your chest. They look at you, perhaps with indifference, perhaps with faint sympathy but never with love. That word is not part of this transaction. You step forward anyway because the eyes of everyone press against your back like a physical force. The vows themselves are short, plain, binding. Do you take this person? You do. Do you pledge yourself to them in sickness and health until death? You do. Words spoken in a trembling voice become shackles around your life. The priest's Latin spills over you, and though you do not understand every phrase, you understand enough. You are no longer your own. The ring, or the token, if no ring is available, is slipped onto your finger, its weight small yet unbearable. The kiss may follow, awkward and cold, a public gesture demanded by custom. The crowd murmurs approval. To them, the marriage is real. To you, it feels like drowning. The feast that follows is loud, raucous, overflowing with ale and laughter. Trays of roasted meat, loaves of bread, wheels of cheese are brought forth. Music swells, fiddles and pipes urging bodies to dance. Guests laugh, toast, spill their cups, mock one another with bawdy songs. All the while, you sit beside the stranger who is now your spouse, your face stiff with forced cheer. People slap your back, jest crudely about the night ahead, remind you of your duties. Their humour makes you shrink inside, because the consummation looms larger than any feast. It is the final seal, the proof demanded not just by families, but sometimes even by witnesses. Some couples are escorted to the chamber with an audience outside the door, listening for confirmation of what happens within. Privacy is not guaranteed. Your body is not yours tonight, just as your life was not yours this morning. As the night deepens and the torches burn lower, you feel the cage close around you. The bells that rang in the morning have faded, replaced by drunken songs, but the sound still echoes in your chest. You lie down on a bed that does not feel like yours, beside a person you did not choose, under vows you did not speak willingly. The world insists this is sacred, holy, binding. To you it feels like theft. And yet tomorrow will come, and the day after, and gradually the weight of this marriage will become the rhythm of your existence. You will work, you will serve, you will bear children if your body allows, and you will wear the role carved for you by others. The village will remember the bells, the feast, the joining of households, but you will remember the knot in your stomach, the hollow in your chest, the truth that on the day the bells rang for your wedding, it was never truly your day at all. The promise of your life is signed away before you even understand what marriage means. You are still a child, knees scuffed from chasing geese out of the yard, fingers sticky from stolen honeycomb, when the grown-ups gather around the hearth to discuss your future. They do not invite you to the table, but you hear enough through whispers and glances. Words like dowry, land, alliance. Your name floats among them, not as a person but as a coin to be spent, a tool to stitch one family to another. You are bartered before you have even learned to write your letters, a future exchanged as casually as if they were trading a cow. They call it betrothal, and in the eyes of the church it is binding. Promises are spoken over cups of ale, hands clasp, contracts sometimes written on scraps of parchment. If you are a girl, the men around you calculate how many chickens, how much wool, how much land you are worth. If you are a boy, your own value is measured against your family's fields and flocks, whether you will inherit enough to make you desirable. No one asks if you like the other child. No one cares if you have even met. Feelings are as irrelevant as the weather. What matters is that the match strengthens ties, or at least doesn't weaken them. Sometimes the betrothal happens so early you are still wobbling on your legs, a toddler promised to another toddler. Sometimes it waits until you are 10 or 11, old enough to feel the sting of the decision. Either way, your fate is spoken into existence years before you are old enough to resist. You are told who you will marry the way you are told what chores you must do. There is no choice. It is not presented as a question. It is simply your duty, a rope tied quietly around your future. The day of formal betrothal, the households gather. Bread is broken, cups passed, and if fortune smiles, there might be music in the background. But beneath the cheer sits a calculation sharper than any knife. The families look each other over, weigh one another's fortunes, tally livestock, and examine fields. The priest may be present to bless the arrangement, nodding solemnly to affirm that canon law has been satisfied, that there is no forbidden bloodline too close. His blessing turns the contract into something holy, as though God himself signed the parchment. The irony is not lost on you, even as a child. Heaven's will, they say, looks suspiciously like land deals and coin counted on a table. If you are a girl, you may be dressed in your best shift, hair brushed until it gleams, cheeks pinched to look healthy and pleasing. If you are a boy, you are expected to stand tall, to act older than your years, to show that you will one day carry the burdens of a household. Both roles feel heavy, costumes draped across children who should be chasing butterflies instead of pretending at adulthood. Your hand might be placed in your betrothed's, small fingers gripping small fingers, and the adults laugh and clap as though it were charming. But for you, the touch is clammy, awkward and frightening. You are bound to someone whose name you barely remember, whose face might change entirely by the time you are grown. From that day onward, your identity shifts. You are no longer just a son or daughter. You are a bride-to-be, a husband-to-be. The other children tease, chanting names, singing mocking rhymes. You flush with embarrassment, but beneath it sits a deeper dread. While they play games that end when the sun sets, your game will last the rest of your life. You will be reminded constantly, when you misbehave, your parents warn you not to shame your future spouse's family. When you fall ill, they fret over your survival less for love than for fear of breaking the contract. When you dream aloud of what you want, someone always interrupts with, "Remember, you are promised." And the church reinforces it at every step. Priests remind you that marriage is sacred, that betrothal is nearly as serious as the vows themselves. Stories of saints and martyrs are recited to you as though your endurance in marriage will be its own act of holiness. Obedience is praised as virtue. Resistance is painted as sin. You are taught that God himself chose this path for you, though you know it was human hands that signed the deal. As you grow, the rope tightens. Letters may be exchanged between families, updates shared on harvests, dowries renegotiated when fortunes change. If your betrothed's family suffers losses, whispers rise about whether the contract should be broken, whether a wealthier match might be found. You live with the uncertainty of knowing your fate is both sealed and fragile, set in stone, yet subject to the chisel of fortune. The adults discuss it all without lowering their voices. Your future hangs in the balance, but your opinion remains irrelevant. By the time you reach adolescence, you are expected to internalize it. Girls are taught household skills, weaving, spinning, cooking, with constant reminders that these are for the husband you are destined to serve. Boys are taught to till fields, to swing tools, to fight if noble enough, with warnings that they must be ready to provide for the wife chosen for them. Even in your education, your individuality is stripped away. You are not being raised for yourself. You are being trained to fulfill a role already assigned. And so you grow into the betrothal, half resigned, half fearful. You picture the day when the bells will ring and the childhood promise will become a lifelong bond. Sometimes you imagine your betrothed's face trying to summon affection from fragments. Sometimes you dream of running, of breaking free, of choosing for yourself. But those dreams dissolve when you see the lash fall on others who defied custom, when you hear stories of annulments denied, of runaways hunted down and punished. Choice is not for you, duty is. Still, in the quiet moments, you wonder what might have been. What if marriage could be about love? What if you could choose someone whose laughter stirred warmth in your chest, whose eyes softened when they met yours? What if, instead of contracts and coins, there was simply a question asked and answered freely? The thought is intoxicating and dangerous, a spark you bury deep inside. Because here, in the medieval world, your marriage is not a promise between two hearts. It is a chain forged long before you understood what it meant to be bound. The feast is loud and everyone pretends it is joyous. Ale sloshes from mugs, children chase one another between the benches, dogs snap at bones tossed under tables. Minstrels play rough tunes and the laughter of your new kin rises in the rafters. You sit stiffly beside your new spouse, stomach knotted, face burning with the weight of expectation. Every glance, every toast, every crude joke bends toward one thing: the night ahead. People are not shy about it. Old uncles wink, women giggle behind their hands, men shout ribald songs. The consummation is not simply a private matter between two people. It is the climax of the entire event, the seal that makes the contract real. Without it, the marriage is incomplete, vulnerable to challenge. And so, what should be the most intimate moment of your life is transformed into a public performance. In some villages, the custom is brutal in its directness. Once the last cup is drained, you and your spouse are led away with a procession at your heels. Torches bob in the dark as laughter follows you, the guests crowding into the chamber or just outside the door. The bed has been prepared with clean linens, sometimes strewn with flowers, sometimes rough and plain, but always central to the ritual. You may be trembling from nerves, from dread, or from disgust, but you are not allowed hesitation. The union must be witnessed. Sometimes the witnesses actually stay inside the room, standing by as if they were midwives to a different kind of birth. More often they linger in the hall, ears pressed to wood, waiting for proof in the form of sound or movement. Some demand a sheet stained with blood as evidence that the bride was indeed a virgin. Servants may parade it before the guests, holding it aloft like a banner of honor. The crowd cheers, feasting resumes, and the marriage is declared not only lawful but sealed by the body. If no blood appears, shame spreads like wildfire. Whispers spark. Was she impure? Was he impotent? Either way, suspicion taints the union, and suspicion in marriage is a dangerous thing. Even for those spared the worst of the spectacle, privacy is never complete. Everyone knows what you are meant to do. Everyone is waiting. You feel their expectation pressing against the walls, seeping under the door, crawling into the bed with you. Your body is not yours tonight. It is a piece of evidence, a proof demanded by law, custom, and family honor. Your spouse may be as nervous as you, or worse, disinterested. The act itself may be clumsy, painful, cold, but passion is irrelevant. What matters is that it happens, and that others believe it has happened. The pressure is enormous. For men, failure to perform risks humiliation, mockery, even annulment petitions. For women, failure to bleed risks shame, suspicion, and scorn. The consummation is supposed to prove not only the union, but also purity, fertility, obedience. The whole future of the marriage and of property, inheritance, alliance rests on this act. You feel less like a human being than like a field being ploughed for the first time, your body a site of proof. The church does not lessen the burden, it enforces it. Priests insist that consummation is required for the sacrament to be complete. Without it, the marriage can be challenged, annulled, undone. And so the priest himself may linger nearby, pretending to be concerned with propriety, but in truth, serving as yet another layer of pressure. The irony is sharp. The same church that lectures against lust insists on this proof of physical union. Desire is sin, Yet duty is mandatory. You are expected to perform a holy act with all the warmth of a transaction. For women, the fear of what follows hangs heavily over the night. Consummation does not only mean proof of union, it means the beginning of endless pregnancies. Childbirth is perilous, a shadow that will haunt the bed for years to come. You may survive this night only to die in a birthing chamber, your body spent by the very marriage sealed here. For men, the fear is different but real. The fear of impotence, of failing to plant seed, of being mocked as less than a man. Both enter the bed carrying the weight of futures decided long before they were old enough to choose. And yet, beneath the humiliation, some couples find quiet humanity. Perhaps your spouse whispers a gentle word, offers a hand rather than a command. Perhaps you share a laugh at the absurdity of the crowd listening outside. In that small moment, the ritual meant to reduce you to property might briefly remind you that you are not alone. But such tenderness is fragile, and it cannot erase the truth. The consummation is not about you, it is about everyone else. When at last it is over, or when enough time has passed for the crowd to assume it is, the witnesses cheer, the family feasts again, the contract is considered fulfilled. You may feel empty, shaken, ashamed, or simply numb. The sheets are proof, your body the seal, your marriage now a fact carved into the order of things. No matter how you feel, there is no undoing it. You return to the world as husband or wife, bound by an act that was never truly yours. And tomorrow, when the bells ring for Mass, when neighbours greet you as a married person, when family begins to speak of heirs and duties, no one will ask what you felt in that chamber. They will only care that the contract is real, that the bed was sealed, that the union is fertile. The world celebrates, and you, standing in the silence of your own thoughts, realize that what they call holy matrimony feels more like the theft of your privacy, your dignity, and your choice. You are still playing with sticks in the dirt when the whispers begin. Too young to understand fully, but old enough to notice the way your parents' eyes linger on you with a different kind of weight. Old enough to hear your name spoken alongside another child's in conversations you are not meant to overhear. And then, without warning, childhood is over. You are told that you are promised. Promised to a boy still learning how to hold a plough, or to a man with grey already in his beard. Promised before you've grown breasts, before your voice has deepened, before your body knows what marriage even means. In the medieval world, age is elastic when it comes to matrimony. The church may set guidelines, 12 for girls, 14 for boys, but custom bends and stretches those numbers as it pleases. Betrothals happen much earlier. Marriages themselves, though sometimes delayed until puberty, are often pushed forward if property, alliance, or fortune demands it. Childhood is not considered a sacred phase of innocence. It is simply preparation for labour, and marriage is just another form of labour. Once your body is judged capable, whether or not it truly is, the vows are thrust upon you. For girls, this is most brutal. At 12, you are told you are a woman, ready to leave your parents' hearth and bear children of your own. Your body disagrees. You still bleed irregularly, you are narrow-hipped. Your strength is barely enough for the spinning wheel or the water bucket, let alone childbirth. Yet the world does not wait. You are dressed in a gown too heavy for your small frame, march to the church, and place beside a man you may not recognize. His hand swallows yours as vows are spoken, and you stand there, child's heart racing, as if you have been cast into a river with no knowledge of how to swim. For boys, the burden is different, but no less crushing. At 14, you are declared a man, though your chin is smooth and your voice still cracks. You are expected to provide, to farm, to fight, to sire heirs. A wife is placed in your care, though you still sleep as though you were a child, dreaming of games and stories. If she is older, you feel dwarfed by her experience. If she is younger, you are no more prepared than she. Either way, the word husband is draped around your shoulders like armor that does not fit. Everyone expects you to wear it proudly, but it pinches and weighs you down until you stagger beneath it. The cruelty is how ordinary this feels to everyone else. Villagers nod approvingly, priests bless the union, parents smile with satisfaction. No one sees the terror in your eyes as anything more than childish nerves. They remind you that your parents married young, that their parents did too. They tell you it is natural, that you will grow into it. But you know the truth. Your growth has been stolen. Childhood is cut short, replaced by the duties of adulthood before you even learned what it meant to live freely. The dangers are not abstract. For girls, early pregnancy is a death sentence as often as it is a beginning. A body not ready for childbirth tears, bleeds, breaks. You have seen it happen in your village. A girl of 13, belly swollen, screams tearing from her throat until silence follows, leaving behind a dead infant and a grieving family. The priest mutters about God's will. The villagers whisper about sin, but all you see is a child buried before she had time to grow. And still, the practice continues, because alliances matter more than lives. For boys, the danger is less visible, but equally real. A 14-year-old husband may inherit fields he cannot manage, debts he cannot pay, battles he cannot fight. Failure invites mockery, shame, punishment. If you cannot protect your wife, you are less than a man. If you cannot provide, you are a failure. The expectations carve into you like knives, leaving wounds that may never fully heal. You are asked to leap into manhood without a bridge, and when you stumble, no one offers sympathy. Even among nobles, where gowns glitter and feasts impress, the pattern remains. Girls are traded young to cement alliances, sent across mountains to marry men 3 times their age. A 12-year-old bride may find herself in a foreign court, surrounded by strangers, expected to produce heirs before she has stopped playing with dolls. History remembers their names, their titles, their royal offspring, but rarely does it pause to see the terrified child beneath the crown. The church insists it is holy. Priests cite scripture, preach obedience, declare that marriage is God's design, but even their rules betray the strangeness. Yes, girls at 12, boys at 14, because that is when the body is considered capable. Capable is not the same as ready. Capable is not the same as willing. Capable is simply a word that justifies a theft, the theft of years, of innocence, of time you should have spent becoming yourself. And so, you find yourself standing in a church while bells ring, dressed in garments that do not feel like yours, speaking words you do not fully understand. Your spouse beside you may be just as frightened, or they may be indifferent, already rehearsed in the idea that marriage is duty, not choice. Either way, your childhood has ended with a phrase, a kiss, a ring. You step out into the world not as the child you still feel like inside, but as someone's husband or wife, a role you were forced into before you had the chance to imagine another. Later, lying in a bed that smells of unfamiliar straw, staring at a ceiling that does not belong to your home, you feel the full weight of it. Childhood was not lost gradually. It was cut, clean and final, by the sharp edge of vows. And tomorrow you will rise not as yourself, but as what others need you to be. The morning after the wedding, you rise before the sun because that is what is expected of you. The bed still smells of strangers, of fear and sweat, but already the rhythm of marriage presses in. Around you the household stirs, servants carrying buckets, children chasing chickens, the sound of the mill wheel grinding in the distance. Life continues as if nothing monumental happened the day before, but for you everything is different. You are no longer simply a son or daughter. You are husband, you are wife, you are bound. And in that binding the rules are painfully clear. One of you commands, the other obeys. The law does not mince words. The husband is the head of the household, the authority granted not only by custom but by the church itself. Priests preach it from pulpits, citing scripture, telling wives to submit as the church submits to Christ. Husbands are told to love their wives, yes, but love here is not tenderness. It is duty, guardianship, ownership wrapped in the language of holiness. The message is clear. A wife is beneath her husband, and his authority is sanctioned by both earth and heaven. To resist him is to resist the natural order. In daily life, this means your voice carries different weight depending on your place. If you are the husband, your word is law. You decide when the fields are ploughed, when the children are disciplined, when the family eats or fasts, when your wife speaks or falls silent. If you are the wife, you measure every word before speaking, careful not to contradict too sharply, careful to defer when others are listening. Even if you are clever, even if you are skilled, you must wrap your opinions in humility, offering them as suggestions rather than commands. You survive by navigating his moods, by reading the tilt of his shoulders, the heaviness of his sighs, the sharpness of his tone. Your life becomes a constant act of interpretation. Discipline within marriage is not hidden. It is expected. A husband is permitted, even encouraged, to correct his wife, to strike her if she disobeys, to restrain her if she resists. The line between correction and cruelty blurs until it disappears altogether. Neighbors may hear shouts, slaps, the thud of fists against wood, but they do not intervene. They shrug, mutter that a man must keep his household in order. A bruised cheek is not scandal, but ordinary. It is only if the beating goes too far, if bones break or blood stains the floor, that whispers of shame begin to stir. Even then, blame often falls on the wife, accused of provoking her husband, of failing in her duty to obey. Yet the power dynamic is more than physical. It seeps into every corner of the marriage. The husband controls money, land, tools. He can sell animals, barter goods, lease fields, all without his wife's consent. She, on the other hand, cannot sell a hen without his approval, cannot leave the household without his knowledge. Her identity is absorbed into his, even her name may be eclipsed, known more often as wife of than as herself. Her body, too, is his to command. Refusing him is unthinkable, for the consummation of marriage is not a single night, but an expectation woven into every night thereafter. Among nobles, the hierarchy grows sharper. A lady of the manor may seem powerful, draped in silk, issuing commands to servants, but even she is bound beneath her husband's authority. He may demand obedience not only in the household but in political matters, silencing her if she dares to wield influence beyond what is deemed proper. If she bears no sons, her position is precarious. He may set her aside, argue for annulment, or take mistresses openly. The grandeur of castles hides the same reality as the mud floors of villages. Power tilts one way, and it is never in the woman's favour. Still, women find ways to endure, even to resist quietly. A wife may manage the household accounts when her husband is away, skimming a little grain for her own security. She may form alliances with other women, sharing advice and protection. She may soften her husband's temper with carefully chosen words, steering his decisions without appearing to contradict him. These are small strategies, survival tactics in a world that denies her open power. Yet they are fragile, always subject to collapse if her husband discovers them. Her safety rests on secrecy, on her ability ability to navigate the unequal ground she walks every day. The imbalance corrodes intimacy. True partnership is rare when one half of the couple holds all authority. Affection may grow, yes, shared laughter at a meal, quiet comfort on a cold night, but it always exists within the framework of dominance and submission. A husband may love his wife, but he also owns her. A wife may care for her husband, but she also fears him. The line between devotion and obligation blurs until it is difficult to know which feeling drives which gesture. The church deepens the imbalance by sanctifying it. Sermons praise obedient wives as holy, docile, virtuous. Saints' lives are held up as examples. Women who endured suffering, abuse, even martyrdom, all framed as signs of faith. Disobedient wives, by contrast, are mocked in sermons and plays, cast as shrews or scolds, cautionary tales meant to keep others in line. Children grow up watching these lessons unfold not only in stories but in their own homes. Boys learn that authority is their right. Girls learn that obedience is their duty. The cycle repeats, generation after generation, each new marriage forged in the same unequal mould. And you, caught inside it, feel the weight each day. If you are the husband, you may wrestle with the role expected of you, sometimes relishing the authority, sometimes chafing at its burden. If you are the wife, you live in the tension between survival and self, between the person you might have been and the person the world insists you must be. Either way, the marriage is less about two people walking side by side and more about one leading while the other follows, bound together by a chain blessed from pulpit and hearth alike. When you lie down at night, staring at the rafters above, the imbalance presses close. If you are husband, you may feel the hollow ache of loneliness that comes with power, knowing your spouse cannot speak freely to you. If you are wife, you may feel the suffocating silence of submission, your thoughts unspoken, your voice swallowed. Marriage in this world is not a meeting of equals, but a hierarchy dressed in sacred robes, a power dynamic written into law, custom, and faith. And whether you rise tomorrow with a smile or with dread, that truth will shape every breath you take. The bed is narrow, the straw beneath the sheets prickling through the linen, and the draught of the night seeps through the shutters no matter how tightly they are barred. You would think this space, small, shadowed, tucked away, might finally belong to you and the person you are bound to. But even here, in the most private of chambers, there are rules. Rules written by priests, whispered by neighbors, enforced by God himself, or so you are told. The marriage bed is not yours. It is Rome's, the church's, the village's. It is watched, regulated, and judged. From the first night, you are made aware that this union is not a secret one. The consummation was demanded, perhaps even witnessed, and the expectation continues long after the wedding feast fades. Your bodies are supposed to prove the union over and over, month after month, in the form of children. Each time you lie down, it is not only for yourself or your spouse, but for family, for lineage, for property. If no children come, tongues wag. Maybe she is barren. Maybe he is impotent. Maybe God is punishing them both. Your bed is never silent because the world never stops talking about it. The church steps into the chamber without ever opening the door. Priests preach from pulpits about when you may and may not touch each other. The calendar itself becomes a third partner in your marriage, dictating abstinence through holy days, fasts, seasons of penitence. Advent is forbidden, Lent is forbidden, Sundays and feast days are forbidden. Nearly half the year is off limits, as though desire itself must bow to ritual. Even when you lie together, the rules continue. Position matters, intent matters. Every act must be directed toward procreation. To seek pleasure for its own sake is sin. To spill seed without the possibility of a child is sin. You carry this weight with you into every embrace, the priest's voice lingering at the back of your skull. And confession makes it worse. You kneel on cold stone and whisper into the dark of the confessional about things you can barely bring yourself to name. Did you desire your spouse too much? Did you delay? Did you indulge? Did you stray in thought? The priest listens, silent, faceless, and then prescribes penance as if your bedroom were an extension of the altar. You rise red-faced, ashamed, and return to the marriage bed more wary than before. Even in the moments when desire stirs naturally, when affection feels real, you hesitate. Will this act damn us? Is this night sinful? Your body becomes a battlefield between instinct and fear. For women, the burden is heavier still. The marriage bed is never fully a choice. Refusal is unthinkable. Consent is irrelevant. A husband may demand his marital debt whenever he chooses, and the church defends his right. A wife's body is her husband's property, her duty sanctified by Scripture. And so she endures, sometimes with quiet resignation, sometimes with tears muffled in the pillow. Her role is not to seek, but to receive. If she becomes pregnant, she bears the risk of pain, of death in childbirth. If she does not, she bears the suspicion of failing in her duty. Either way, the bed is not hers. For men, the fear lies in performance. Failure to consummate, failure to produce heirs, failure to satisfy expectations, all are grounds for shame, for ridicule, even for annulment petitions that could unravel the marriage. A man who falters in the bed falters in his honor. Whispers spread quickly in villages, faster in courts, and reputation is as fragile as glass. And so he carries a different kind of burden into the chamber, one of pressure, of dread, of the crushing need to prove himself. The irony is that this space, which should be the most intimate, is instead the most exposed. Neighbors speculate on how often you lie together. Servants listen through doors. Families demand proof of children. Even ballads and jokes mock the married bed. Husbands portrayed as henpecked, wives as cold or nagging. What should be private becomes a public theatre, an endless performance you cannot step away from. Yet amid the rules, the judgment, the fear, there are flashes of humanity. A shared smile in the dark, a whispered comfort after a long day, a warmth that no priest can legislate away. Sometimes affection slips through the cracks, small and quiet, a rebellion of tenderness in a world that insists marriage is duty. But those moments are fragile. They exist under the weight of scrutiny, easily crushed by the reminder that this bed does not belong to you. You lie awake some nights staring at the beams overhead, listening to the sound of your spouse's breath beside you, and you feel the walls pressing in. The bed should be sanctuary, but it is only another place where your body is not yours. You are bound by vows, by law, by Scripture, by the endless eyes of community and church. Even in silence, even in darkness, the bed is never private. And when dawn comes, when you rise to work and pray and obey, you carry the knowledge that the only space meant to be your own has been taken too. The door shuts, the latch slides, and from the outside it looks like privacy. A husband and wife, alone together in their chamber, the hearth smouldering low, the night quiet except for the creak of timbers in the roof. But the truth is that walls in the medieval world are thin, and the sounds of what happens within a household seep outward. Neighbors hear, servants hear, children hear. The silence of the community is not ignorance, it is complicity. Everyone knows that violence belongs to marriage as much as vows or rings, and few believe it their place to intervene. A husband is told from the start that he is the head of the household, and with authority comes the right to discipline. Priests preach it, laws permit it, neighbors expect it. A wife is commanded to obey, and if she does not, correction is his duty. That word, correction, covers a multitude of sins. A slap across the cheek for speaking out of turn, a fist in the ribs for serving burnt bread, a belt, a rod, or a whip for defiance, imagined or real. The line between discipline and cruelty is blurred until there is no line at all. For the wife, life becomes a matter of walking a narrow path. Speak too loudly, you invite rebuke. Spend too freely, you risk a beating. Fail to conceive, you may be punished not only with words, but with blows, as though your womb were a field you simply refuse to sow. Even simple accidents, a spilled cup of wine, a forgotten errand, can spark fury. You learn to read the tilt of his brow, the heaviness of his breath, the way he grips his cup. You know the signs, the moments when danger simmers just beneath the surface, and you learn to shrink, to soften your voice, to disappear before the storm breaks. Survival is obedience. And when the storm comes, you endure. Sometimes it is quick, a burst of anger that fades as swiftly as it rises. Sometimes it is long, deliberate, methodical. A husband may boast afterward that he has kept order, and neighbours nod as though he has repaired a fence. The bruises on your arms, the cuts on your lip, are not scandal. They are ordinary. If you cover them poorly, people may joke about it, muttering about sharp tongues and sharper hands. Laughter becomes its own lash, binding you more tightly in silence. For husbands too, violence is normalized. They are taught that to let a wife rule the household is shameful, that to endure her defiance without response is weakness. Plays mock henpecked husbands. Sermons warn against letting women lead. The expectation is clear: a man who does not strike when necessary is less than a man. And so, violence becomes a performance of masculinity, proof of authority, as much a social expectation as it is a private impulse. Some husbands may hate it, their blows landing with shame even as they convince themselves it is duty. Others may relish it, finding in cruelty a twisted sense of power. Either way, the world supports them. The church rarely condemns outright. Priests may preach moderation, may urge husbands not to be excessively cruel, but the principle remains unchallenged. A wife must obey, and correction is her husband's right. Ecclesiastical courts hear complaints now and then, but outcomes often favour the man. Unless her bones are broken or her blood stains the floor, her suffering is considered private, not public, and even then, she may be sent back to him, told to endure patiently as Christ endured the cross. Her pain is sanctified, turned into virtue, a lesson for others to follow. Children grow up beneath this shadow. They hear the shouting, the weeping, the blows, and they absorb the lesson. This is what marriage looks like. Sons learn to emulate their fathers. Daughters learn to fear their future. The cycle repeats, etched into bodies and memories, generation after generation. Violence becomes not an aberration, but a tradition, as much a part of marriage as bread at the table or prayers at the shrine. And yet, within this cruelty, people find ways to survive. Some women form quiet alliances, whispering to neighbours, seeking small acts of protection. A sympathetic midwife, a kind sister-in-law, a servant who turns a blind eye and presses herbs into bruised skin. These gestures do not undo the violence, but they soften it, reminding you that not everyone believes it is just. Some men too resist the expectation, choosing silence over blows, patience over rage. They may be mocked for weakness, but in their restraint lies a kind of rebellion against the world's cruelty. Still, for most, violence is a constant. You carry its memory in your body, in the way you flinch at sudden movements, in the way you guard your words. You dream of nights when the house is quiet, when you can sleep without fear of footsteps approaching in anger. But those nights are rare, and fear becomes as regular as the toll of the church bell. When you look at your marriage, you realize it is not built only on vows, property, and children, but on the threat of force. It is the silent foundation that holds everything together. a foundation no one admits aloud but everyone understands. And when you walk through the village with bruises hidden under your sleeves, the glances you receive are not of shock, but of recognition. Everyone knows, and no one will say. Behind closed doors, where love should be nurtured, where tenderness should bloom, there is instead the crack of blows and the echo of silence. You are told this is normal, this is holy, this is the way of things. But in the quiet of your own heart, you know the truth. It is cruelty sanctified, violence disguised as order, pain endured because the world has decided it must be so. And when you close your eyes at night, hoping for rest, the sound of the latch sliding shut no longer promises privacy. It promises only the uncertainty of what will follow. The word divorce is not one you hear in your village, at least not in the way a modern ear might expect. To separate from your spouse as if you could simply untie the knot, that is impossible. The Church has declared marriage a sacrament, indissoluble, unbreakable, sealed by God Himself. What God has joined, no man may put asunder. And yet marriages do end, not through divorce, but through loopholes, technicalities, courtroom battles that look less like matters of the heart and more like legal chess games. It is not about dissolving what exists. It is about proving it never should have existed in the first place. The path is called annulment. The marriage, if annulled, is declared null from the start, as though the vows you spoke, the bed you shared, the years you endured were all a mirage. It was never valid, never real. To reach that conclusion requires arguments, evidence, and a willingness to drag your most private life into the open. Suddenly, what happened in your bed, what was whispered on your wedding day, who touched whom and when, it all becomes fodder for scandal. The simplest loophole, though rarely simple in practice, is consanguinity. The Church forbids marriage between those related too closely, at times extending the definition of close to absurd degrees. Seventh degree of kinship, they once said, which means that you could find yourself married for years before someone conveniently discovers that your great-great-great-grandmothers were sisters. This revelation, often raised when one party wants an escape, suddenly becomes dynamite. The case is taken to ecclesiastical court, parchments are produced, genealogies recited, witnesses summoned to testify about family trees. Sometimes money changes hands to ensure the right decision. If the court agrees, the marriage is annulled. You walk away, technically unbound, though the village will not forget how eagerly your kinship was scrutinized. Another route is impotence, though the humiliation it carries is immense. If a husband cannot consummate the marriage, the wife may argue that the union was never real, but proving it requires intimate and invasive procedures. Midwives, physicians, even clerics may be summoned to examine the body, to test its capacity, to pry into the most private failures. Rumors spread quickly, mocking songs appear in taverns, neighbors whisper. Even if the annulment is granted, the man is scarred socially, branded impotent for life. His masculinity is questioned in every glance. For the woman, freedom may be won, but it comes at the cost of having paraded her marriage bed before the world. Coercion is another loophole, though a perilous one. If you can prove you were forced into marriage, dragged to the altar against your will, threatened by family, trapped by circumstance, you might claim the vows were invalid. Consent, after all, is what the Church insists makes a marriage. But proving lack of consent is nearly impossible when everyone remembers you speaking the words. A trembling "I do" still counts as agreement. And worse, accusations of coercion often drag families into scandal, setting kin against kin, damaging reputations for generations. It is a path rarely taken unless desperation outweighs fear. Annulment cases are not limited to peasants. Among nobles, they become weapons. Kings and queens plead their marriages invalid when alliances sour, when a wife fails to produce an heir, when political winds shift. Courts in Rome fill with petitions from powerful households, each arguing their case with polished Latin bribes and threats. The outcome can reshape kingdoms. Yet even in the grandeur of palaces, the scandal remains the same. Everyone whispers about what happened in the bedchamber, about whose body failed, about whose consent was coerced. No rank is high enough to escape gossip. For ordinary people, scandal is both weapon and punishment. If you pursue annulment, your neighbors will dissect your life, turning every rumor into evidence. They will recall arguments, question bruises, speculate about children. Your marriage becomes public property, its flaws entertainment for others. Even if the court rules in your favor, the damage lingers. You are free in law but not in reputation. The village will always remember. You will always be the one whose spouse couldn't, or whose cousin turned out to be too close, or whose family forced the match. The stain is permanent. And yet, for some, the risk is worth it. A woman beaten too severely, a man trapped in a barren union, a noble desperate for heirs, all gamble on the loopholes. They endure the humiliation, the whispers, the trials, because the alternative is lifelong imprisonment in a marriage that suffocates them. For everyone who succeeds, though, countless others fail. The church rarely grants annulments lightly. Too many, and the sacrament itself weakens. Too many, and marriage becomes flexible, and that cannot be allowed. So the gates are narrow, the scrutiny harsh, the odds slim. Most remain trapped, their petitions denied, their shame doubled by public rejection. In the end, annulment is less about freedom and more about appearances. The church must maintain its authority, families must maintain their honor, and individuals are crushed between the two. You might escape legally, but you will never escape the whispers. You might win your freedom, but only after offering your most intimate wounds for public inspection. Annulment does not cleanse, it stains, in a different shade. So you live with the knowledge that your marriage is not truly unbreakable, but breaking it comes at a cost so high that few dare try. You might daydream of claiming coercion, of finding some distant cousin in a family tree, of pointing to the failures of the bed. But when you imagine the priest's questions, the neighbor's stares, the laughter in taverns, the whispers passed down to your children, you falter. Better to endure quietly than to become a spectacle. Better to wear the chain in silence than to rattle it and call the world's attention. And so the church can boast that divorce does not exist. What exists instead is a labyrinth of loopholes, a theatre of scandal, where people must wound themselves publicly to win the smallest chance of release. It is not justice, it is survival, offered only to those willing to pay the price in coin, shame, or both. And when you pass a couple in the street who smile politely at one another but never meet each other's eyes, you wonder how many are bound by love and how many are bound by fear of what would happen if they tried to undo what was never theirs to choose. You wake each day and the walls of marriage close around you, though they are not made of stone. They are made of custom, expectation, and law, invisible yet immovable. From the moment vows are spoken, the freedom of your life is narrowed to a corridor, and whether you are born into a peasant's hut or a noble's hall, the shape of that corridor is the same. Marriage is not simply a bond between two people. It is a tether that binds you to land if you are lowborn, to dynasty if you are highborn, to labor and lineage alike. Either way, it is not a gate opening to new possibility. It is a cage, dressed in garlands, blessed with holy water, and locked with a key you will never hold. For peasants, the trap is plain. Marriage fixes you in place like a nail hammered into a beam. You marry, and your body is now part of a plot of land, its fields, its seasons, its taxes. You do not drift, you do not wander, you do not imagine other futures. If your husband farms his lord's land, then you rise before dawn to carry water, to weed, to haul, to cook, to nurse children who will someday take his place. Your labor is not yours. It is an extension of the family, of the manor, of the endless cycle of planting and reaping. You may dream of leaving, of seeing other towns, of traveling with merchants or pilgrims, but marriage smothers that dream quickly. Your duties multiply, to your spouse, to your children, to your household. The ties are practical, inescapable, and heavy. The land itself becomes a third partner in your union. The field dictates your days more than affection ever could. If you are wife to a farmer, your back aches with bending, your hands chap with washing. Your womb swells with the expectation of heirs to continue the work. If you are husband, you are measured by how many bushels you can bring in, how many debts you can pay. Marriage does not elevate you. It anchors you, straps you to soil and toil until your bones break. Love is not the question. The harvest is. For nobles, the prison is gilded, but it is a prison nonetheless. Here, marriage is not about bread or barley, but about bloodlines and politics. You may be sent across a kingdom, or even across the sea, to marry someone you have never met, because the union cements peace between families or ensures your lord gains land without raising a sword. You become a pawn in dynastic chess, your body the piece moved across the board. A noble woman is married not for herself, but for her womb, expected to bear heirs who will bind two houses into one. A nobleman is married not for love, but for the dowry, the estates, the alliances. Your personal desires are dust compared to the weight of your family's ambition. Once wed, the prison walls close even tighter. If you are a noblewoman, your movements are watched, your friendships scrutinized, your words weighed. Every child you bear is counted, every miscarriage mourned not for your pain but for the loss of an heir. If you are barren, you are whispered about, pitied, sometimes discarded. If you are fruitful, you are praised not as a person but as a vessel of continuity. If you are a nobleman, you are judged by how well you secure your estates, how faithfully you uphold your alliances. The marriage is a chain linking families, and you are the link hammered into place. The church reinforces the prison with its solemn blessing. Marriage, they declare, is holy, unbreakable, sacred. But the holiness is less about your soul and more about order. The church knows that if marriages dissolve freely, inheritance shatters, bloodlines tangle, and society frays. So they tighten the bonds with doctrine, forbidding divorce, limiting annulments, insisting that obedience is virtue. For peasants, this means you cannot flee a cruel spouse without risking damnation. For nobles, this means you cannot break free of a political union even if it poisons your heart. God's will and society's needs merge, and you are crushed between them. Everyday life in this prison is marked by duty. If you are poor, you wake to chores that never end. Your spouse not a partner in freedom, but a partner in survival. The marriage ties you not only to land, but to debt, to obligation to your lord, to the feudal chain that stretches from your hearth all the way to the king's court. If you are rich, you rise to servants dressing you, to councils and banquets, but your schedule is not your own either. You dine with those chosen by alliance. You write letters dictated by politics. You bear children to secure treaties. You may ride in silks rather than rags, but the chain is just as heavy. The cruelty lies in how little of yourself remains untouched. Marriage claims your labor, your body, your children, your future. If you are peasant, you may have moments of laughter with your spouse, brief joys that soften the burden, but the cage remains. If you are noble, you may feel affection for the stranger you were ordered to wed, but affection is irrelevant when every move you make is dictated by the interests of your house. In both cases, marriage swallows individuality. You become wife of, husband of, mother to, father to. You are no longer yourself. And what happens if you resist? If you, as a peasant woman, flee your husband's house, you may be hunted, dragged back, beaten, forced to submit again. If you, as a noble, refuse your match, you endanger your family's standing, provoke wrath, risk being cast out. Resistance is not noble, it is ruinous. Most do not even dream of it. They learn instead to fold themselves into the prison, to find slivers of joy where they can, to survive within the walls rather than attempt escape. You hear stories sometimes of those who defied the system. A peasant couple who eloped without permission, hiding in the woods until the priest caught them. A noble who broke an engagement, sparking a feud that ended in blood. These tales circulate as warnings more than inspirations, reminders that the prison cannot be escaped without cost. And so, you bow your head, you do your duty, you wear the chains quietly. The tragedy is how ordinary it all becomes. People grow up watching their parents endure the same, grandparents before them, children after them. The prison does not feel like a cage because it is the air everyone breathes. People joke about marriage, sigh about its burdens, sing songs of nagging wives and henpecked husbands, but they do not question its structure. They accept it as life, unchangeable, inevitable. And so you live, bound to land or to lineage, to field or to dynasty. You may love your spouse, or you may despise them. You may share tenderness, or you may share only silence. Either way, it does not matter. The marriage is not about you, it is about the system it upholds. You are the mortar between stones, the rope in the loom, the link in the chain. And though the garlands wither, though the vows fade in memory, the prison remains, built from centuries of custom and sanctified by heaven's decree. When you look at your life, you realize that the truest vow you spoke was not to your spouse, but to the cage itself. You did not say it aloud, but you live it every day, to honor and obey, until death parts you. Not only from your partner, but from the prison that bound you both. You know it from the moment the vows are spoken. If you are a woman, marriage means children. Not the soft, idealized image of babies in lullabies, but the relentless reality of pregnancy after pregnancy, belly swelling as predictably as the changing seasons. The marriage bed is not yours to control, and the church insists that procreation is its purpose. The village expects heirs, your husband expects sons, and nature itself rarely pauses. Once you are wed, your body becomes the field where lineage is sown, and there is no rest between harvests. At first, there may be excitement, hope whispered in kitchens and fields. Your belly grows and neighbors comment with approval. They imagine a boy who will help in the fields, or a girl who will carry water and weave linen. But beneath their chatter lies a darker truth everyone knows, yet does not speak. Each pregnancy is a wager with death. No matter how many children surround you, no matter how ordinary the sight of a swollen belly, every birth could be the last. The dangers begin long before the child arrives. Morning sickness weakens you, hunger gnaws, your body aches as you struggle to keep working. A peasant woman cannot put down her spindle or her bucket because she is with child. She labors in the fields until her back splits with pain, hauls water until her knees buckle, cooks and cleans while dizziness darkens her eyes. A noble woman may escape the heaviest work, but her body is not spared. Silk gowns cannot prevent swelling, bleeding, infection. Rich or poor, the risk is the same. Your body is a vessel, and vessels crack. When the pains begin, fear settles heavier than hope. The birthing chamber fills with women, midwives, neighbors, mothers, sisters, all gathered to help, or simply to witness. Men wait outside, pacing, praying for sons, but leaving the labor to women's hands. Candles flicker, herbs are burned, prayers muttered. The midwife examines you, her hands rough but practiced, her voice calm even as her eyes betray worry. You grip cloth, wood, flesh, anything to hold against the waves of pain that roll through you like fire. Hours stretch, sometimes days. Your body stretched to tearing. And then sometimes it goes wrong. The child will not turn. The bleeding will not stop. The labour stalls until you are more corpse than living. In this world, there are no surgeons to cut, no medicines to ease, no reliable knowledge of infection. There are only prayers, herbs, and hope. You may die screaming, or you may die silently, slipping away into exhaustion. And if you die, so too may the child, suffocated before it takes its first breath. One grave becomes two, sometimes dug by the same hands that helped carry you to the birthing bed. Even if you survive, the dangers linger. Infections fester, fevers rise, milk fails, bodies weaken. Some women never fully recover. They limp, they bleed for months, their wombs prolapse, their strength drains away. But there is no time to heal. Soon another pregnancy comes, another risk, another night of fear. Marriage means children, and children mean endless rounds of danger. It does not matter if you already have 6, or if 3 have already died in infancy. You are expected to keep bearing until your body gives out, or your husband does. For men, the risk is quieter, but no less real. They may lose wives as often as they gain children, left widowed repeatedly, remarrying again and again to keep the household running. A man might bury 2 or 3 wives in his lifetime, each lost to childbirth, and still expect the next marriage to produce heirs. Death in childbed is as ordinary as death in war, and women are the soldiers pressed into this battle without armour. The Church sanctifies the suffering. Priests preach that a woman's pain in childbirth is God's punishment for Eve's sin, a curse inherited from the first mother. Screams in the birthing chamber are framed as holy endurance, suffering that mirrors Christ's passion. Survival is praised as God's mercy. Death is accepted as His will. Either way, the woman's pain is never hers alone. It belongs to theology, to tradition, to the order of things. You know women who have died this way. You remember their faces, pale and drenched in sweat, eyes wide with fear as they clutched your hand. You remember the silence after the cries ended, the wailing of husbands outside, the whispers of neighbours afterward, and always the grave, simple, swift, one more mound of earth in the churchyard. Life goes on, babies still cry, fields still need tending, men still remarry. The woman's suffering is folded into the rhythm of the village, spoken of briefly, then forgotten as though it were no more remarkable than rain. But you, living through it, cannot forget. Each time your belly swells, you feel the shadow pressing close. You look at your children and wonder which will grow with a mother, and which will bury one before they can even remember your face. You kiss them at night, lingering longer because you know you may not wake. The love is fierce, but so is the fear, and you cannot say no. Refusal is unthinkable. Refusal is sin. The bed is duty, the womb is destiny, and the risk is inevitable. And so, childbirth becomes the cruel heartbeat of marriage. Months of dread, days of agony, brief joy or bitter grief, and then the cycle begins again. For some, it ends early in death. For others, it drags on through a dozen pregnancies until their bodies collapse. Very few escape unscarred. Even the lucky carry the memories, the screams of other women, the graves in the churchyard, the fear etched into every season of swelling bellies. When historians centuries later speak of marriage, they may speak of alliances, of property, of romance idealized in poems. They will forget the smell of blood in a birthing chamber, the prayers whispered by terrified women, the fever that follows infection, the sight of a child wailing beside a lifeless mother. They will forget because they can, but you, living in it, cannot. You know that in this world, to marry as a woman is to march toward childbirth, and to march toward childbirth is to march toward Every marriage begins with bells and feasts. Many end with screams and graves. This is the truth behind the vows, the unspoken line every woman knows. Until death do us part, and sometimes death waits in the very act of fulfilling the promise. The vows you spoke before the priest were not equal, though the words sounded the same. Both promised fidelity, both promised to honor the union. But the world outside the church walls does not weigh sin equally. Once you are married, your life is measured against a double standard so stark it feels like a cruel joke. If you are a man, your straying may be frowned upon, whispered about, but rarely punished. If you are a woman, even suspicion of unfaithfulness can drag you into shame, beating, or death. Marriage in this way becomes less a shared bond than a trap weighted heavily on one side. Men are expected to wander. Songs and stories make it almost charming. Men who tumble with tavern girls, who keep mistresses, who slip into servants' beds. Neighbours mutter, wives sigh, priests scold, but little more comes of it. A man's infidelity is framed as weakness of the flesh, a failing to confess and atone for, not a crime to destroy him. So long as he continues to provide heirs, so long as his indiscretions do not threaten inheritance, the world shrugs. It is almost assumed that a man will stray. Indeed, those who do not are sometimes mocked as soft, henpecked, or unmanly. For women, the world is merciless. Fidelity is demanded not for love, but for certainty. A man must be sure that the children born in his household are his, that his land and his name will pass to his blood. A wife who strays threatens this certainty, and so her body is policed with vigilance. She is watched, gossiped about, restricted in movement, warned against too much laughter with another man. Even kindness can be misread, a smile twisted into suspicion. And suspicion is often enough. Once tongues wag, the stain cannot be scrubbed away, no matter how innocent the truth. Punishments for women vary, but all are brutal. A peasant woman caught in adultery may be paraded through the village with her hair shorn, her body stripped to shame her before all. She may be beaten by her husband, her family, or even the community itself, her body turned into a lesson for others. In harsher cases, she may be stoned, drowned, or burned, the execution carried out publicly so that every woman in sight learns what fate awaits those who stray. The law is not always uniform. Some regions impose fines, others death, but the principle is constant. A woman's infidelity is treated as a crime against the order of the world. Even when punishment does not kill, it destroys. A woman accused, even falsely, may never escape the brand of adulteress. Neighbours whisper when she passes. Husbands forbid their wives from speaking to her. Children mock her offspring as illegitimate. She becomes a ghost in her own village, alive but cut off, an exile without leaving home. Meanwhile, the man with whom she supposedly strayed may walk unpunished, free to boast or to deny, his reputation barely singed. The imbalance is staggering, but it is upheld by custom, law, and church alike. The church thunders against adultery in sermons, citing it as sin for both sexes, but in practice, the weight falls heaviest on women. Priests scold men in confession, assign prayers, fasting, pilgrimages. A man's soul may suffer, but his body rarely does. For women, the church often sides with husbands, supporting their authority to punish and control. A woman's tears in confession may be met with pity, but rarely protection. She is reminded that her duty is obedience, that her suffering is part of God's design. The pulpit may condemn both equally, but the world enforces only one half of the sentence. Among nobles, adultery becomes political theatre. Kings keep mistresses openly, their courts buzzing with intrigue. Lords parade their affairs, sometimes flaunting bastards as proof of virility. Wives are expected to endure in silence, their humiliation public, but their recourse non-existent. Should a noble woman stray, however, the consequences are catastrophic. Queens have been accused and executed, their alleged infidelity treated as treason. Princesses have been locked away in convents, noble ladies cast out, their children declared illegitimate. Dynasties tremble when a woman is accused, because inheritance itself is called into question. A king's mistress may rise to power, but a queen accused of adultery may fall to the axe. The hypocrisy is obvious to everyone, but it is so ingrained that few question it. Men justify their straying as natural, even necessary. Women justify their silence as survival. Neighbours laugh at bawdy tales of men's affairs, then stone women for the same. Plays mock nagging wives, but wink at philandering husbands. The culture itself is steeped in the double standard, reinforcing it at every turn until it feels less like injustice and more like the weather, unfair but inescapable. And yet, despite the risks, affairs happen. Desire does not bow easily to law. A peasant wife may fall for a man who shows her kindness absent in her home. A noble woman may find solace in a knight who treats her as more than a pawn in dynastic games. These liaisons are often fleeting, always dangerous, but they persist because human hearts resist cages. The tragedy is that the price is so often paid by the woman alone. When caught, she bears the lash, the shame, the grave, while the man walks away with little more than bruised pride. You live with the knowledge that one misstep, one glance too long, one whisper overheard could end your life. If you are a woman, every friendship with a man is a risk. Every journey outside your home invites suspicion. Even your children's resemblance can be scrutinized, their faces compared to neighbors, their features dissected for signs of betrayal. Your fidelity is not simply expected, it is demanded with a blade at your throat. Meanwhile, if you are a man, your indulgences are almost expected. You may boast in the tavern of your escapades, confess them lightly to your priest, laugh them off with neighbors. So long as you do not shame your household too publicly, your reputation remains intact. You may even grow in stature, admired for your virility. It is not equality. It is not fairness. It is the raw imbalance of a system built to protect men's honor at the cost of women's lives. And so, adultery becomes less about love or lust than about power. For men, it is a risk easily absorbed. For women, it is a gamble with death. The rules are written to guard property and lineage, not to nurture affection. You may stand before the altar on your wedding day believing the vows bind you both equally, but the world knows better. If he strays, he will be forgiven. If you do, you may not live to confess it. This truth hangs in the air of every household, unspoken but understood. It shapes how women walk, how they speak, how they breathe. It shapes how men act, how they boast, how they judge. Marriage in the medieval world is not only a chain, it is a chain with uneven links, one heavier than the other. And in the dim light of your chamber, when you turn away from your husband and stare at the rafters, you understand fully. Fidelity may be holy in word, but in practice it is only demanded of you. The rules are clear enough. Marriage must be witnessed, blessed, sanctioned by priest and parish, written into ledgers that will outlast your own life. But the heart is not always obedient. There are moments when two young people, suffocated by arrangements made by parents and lords, dare to seize something for themselves. They meet in fields, in barns, in chapels after dusk, and they whisper vows that bind them in the only way they know how. No dowry is exchanged, no priest stands by, no witnesses record it. They clasp hands, speak words of fidelity, and believe, sometimes with fierce, desperate conviction, that they are married before God, if not before man. These are the secret marriages, the elopements, the clandestine vows that haunt the medieval world. They are born of longing, rebellion, and the simple fact that the human heart refuses to bend neatly into the shape of a contract. For the lovers, these vows are real, sacred, binding. For the church, they are chaos. The church insists that consent makes a marriage valid. In its eyes, two people who freely give themselves to each other are truly married. But consent is slippery when spoken in shadows, without witnesses, without records. Who is to prove it? And what happens when one partner later denies the vows were ever spoken? What happens when a woman claims she is wed, but the man shrugs and says no? What happens when children are born, their legitimacy questioned, their inheritance cast into doubt? The church sees not romance in these secret vows, but disorder, confusion, lawsuits, and illegitimate heirs clogging the arteries of society. Inheritance is the heart of the panic. Land must pass clearly from parent to child, name to name. A clandestine marriage threatens that clarity. Imagine a young man promised by his father to one heiress, but secretly vowing himself to another girl he truly loves. Which marriage is valid? Which children inherit? The possibility of chaos terrifies not only the church but every family with property to protect. Love may be tender, but land is hard and unforgiving, and land will not be gambled away on whispered promises in a barn. And so the church cracks down. Councils issue decrees. Priests thunder from pulpits that secret marriages are sins against order. New rules emerge. Marriages must be performed in daylight, in the presence of witnesses, at the doors of the church. The couple must speak their vows aloud, not hidden in corners, but before the eyes of community and God's representative. Later, bans are introduced. Public announcements of the intended union, read aloud 3 weeks running so that any impediment may be declared. These measures are not born of romance, but of fear. They are iron bars meant to cage the unruly heart, to force love into the shape of law. Still, elopements happen. Young couples desperate to escape arranged matches flee by night to a chapel or to a sympathetic priest. They speak their vows quickly, trembling, certain that the moment is holy even if it is illegal. Sometimes they are caught, dragged back, shamed, punished. Sometimes they vanish into another village, living as man and wife until the truth is uncovered. And sometimes, against all odds, they succeed, slipping through the cracks of the system and forging a life outside its control. These stories are whispered with fascination, half warning, half inspiration. For every one that ends in ruin, another ends in endurance, and so the dream persists. The church's fear of secret marriages is not unfounded. Cases flood the courts. A woman claims her husband abandoned her, but she insists he vowed himself to her in private. A man denies it, and now judges must sift through testimony, rumor, scraps of memory. Did he take her hand? Did he say the words? Did anyone overhear? These disputes clog the machinery of canon law, each one a reminder that hearts are harder to police than land. And scandal grows from these cases. Villages split in gossip, families feud, reputations rot. A girl who insists she is wed but cannot prove it becomes a pariah, mocked, called harlot. Her children branded bastards. A man who claims a secret vow to avoid an arranged marriage may find himself punished, his family's honor stained. Even when courts rule, the community rarely forgets. The mark of a clandestine union lingers, staining lives like a blot of ink on parchment that no scrubbing can erase. Yet despite the risk, the allure remains. For those trapped in loveless matches, or those terrified of being bartered away for dowries, the secret vow is a spark of rebellion. It is the one way to seize a shred of control, to claim that at least in this one thing, choice belongs to you. Lovers risk shame, punishment, even excommunication, because the heart whispers louder than the pulpit. They whisper vows in meadows, in kitchens, in the quiet corners of markets, believing that for a moment they are free. The church's answer grows harsher. Laws multiply. Witnesses become mandatory. Bans become strict. Punishments increase. A priest who performs clandestine vows may be stripped of office. A couple caught may be fined, beaten, cast out. Marriage is wrenched further and further from the private into the public, stripped of secrecy, made into a spectacle of order. To the church, this is salvation. To the lovers, it is theft. And yet in quiet corners, the whispers continue. People still believe that love, spoken honestly, carries the weight of heaven whether or not a priest is present. Some cling to the belief that God hears vows in barns as clearly as in churches, that truth is not bound by law. These are dangerous thoughts, but they linger, because the cage of marriage is heavy and hearts are stubborn. You live in a world where marriage is less about affection than about control. The church, terrified of disorder, builds walls around it, forces it into the open, stamps it with authority. But you also live in a world where people risk everything to whisper vows in secret, knowing the price but daring to claim the moment anyway. And when you hear the story of a couple who ran, who defied family and law to marry for love, you feel the sting of envy as much as the chill of fear. The church wins most of the time. It writes the laws, commands the pulpits, punishes the rebels. But in the space between its decrees, the human heart continues to murmur its own defiance. And though those murmurs may rarely escape the shadow of scandal, they prove again and again that even in a world ruled by priests and parchments, love finds ways to speak where it should not. The wedding of a peasant begins with mud. The lane to the church is rutted and slick. Chickens scatter as neighbours gather, and the air smells of smoke, ale, and sweat. The bride wears her best shift, perhaps borrowed, perhaps patched, a wreath of herbs in her hair if fortune allows. The groom may have scrubbed himself in the stream that morning, but his nails are still blackened from soil, his hands cracked by the plough. The whole village attends because weddings are rare moments of festivity in a life otherwise defined by toil. There will be bread, maybe a pig slaughtered, ale flowing from barrels, songs bawdy and loud. The vows are spoken quickly at the church door, the priest solemn but brief before the celebration spills out into fields and cottages. For peasants, the wedding is not about spectacle but about survival. The dowry may be a few chickens, a spinning wheel, a patch of field. The groom may bring nothing more than his strong back and his father's blessing. The union is practical, binding labour to labour, ensuring there will be hands to work, wombs to birth, children to carry water and tend flocks. The feast, though joyous, is temporary. Tomorrow, the bride will rise before dawn to fetch water as she always has. Only now she does so in another household, her body and labour transferred like a tool from one family to another. Her marriage is celebrated with laughter, but beneath the laughter lies the knowledge that her work has simply shifted. Noble weddings, by contrast, are theatre. The mud is swept away, replaced by tapestries, garlands, silks. Trumpets announce the procession, guests wear jewels, and scribes prepare to record every detail. The bride may be 12, dressed in gowns too heavy for her slight frame, her face powdered pale, her hair arranged to gleam like spun gold. The groom may be thrice her age, wrapped in brocade, his belt heavy with a sword. The union is not about two bodies but about two estates. Land, wealth and power change hands, not chickens or spinning wheels. Every bow, every prayer, every goblet raised is a symbol of political alliance. The vows are still spoken at the church door, for even the highest lords must bend to the same ritual. But the crowd is larger, the priest more cautious, the witnesses more illustrious. When the words are spoken, they echo far beyond the walls of the church, carrying implications for kingdoms and courts. The feast that follows is not simply merriment but pageantry. Peacocks roasted whole, tables groaning with venison, musicians playing without pause, poets reciting verses of love that rarely reflects the reality of the union. The spectacle dazzles, but at its heart it is no different than the peasant's feast, a contract made flesh, a transaction disguised with song. In both worlds, love is not the focus. For peasants, the union is a means of survival, another set of hands for work, another womb for children. For nobles, the union is strategy, an heir-producing bond that secures dynasties. In neither case is the bride asked what she desires. In neither case is the groom given freedom to choose without consequence. The difference lies only in scale. For one, the stage is a muddy village lane, for the other, a glittering hall. And yet, in both, the pressure of expectation is suffocating. The peasant girl, crowned with herbs, may laugh at the feast, but she knows that her marriage binds her to backbreaking labor and unending childbirth. The noble girl, crowned with gold, may smile in the hall, but she knows her marriage binds her to politics, scrutiny, and pregnancies that will be watched by entire courts. Both wear garlands, both are blessed by priests, both are cheered by their communities, both step into cages disguised as ceremonies. The rituals themselves show the divide. A peasant couple may dance in a barn until the rafters shake, drink until their legs give out, collapse in straw with songs still on their lips. A noble couple dances under chandeliers, their steps rehearsed, every gesture watched, their bodies never free to stumble. The peasant feast ends with empty barrels and laughter. The noble feast ends with negotiations whispered in corners, letters drafted to announce the union to distant courts. But whether in mud or in marble, the same truth lingers. Tomorrow, the bride and groom wake to lives they did not freely choose, bound by vows they were expected, not invited, to speak. And the consummation looms in both cases. In the peasant hut, perhaps neighbors press ears to walls, laughing, listening, demanding proof. In the noble chamber, perhaps ladies in waiting escort the bride to bed, stripping her garments, laying her beside her husband as witnesses stand nearby. In both, the union is not private but public, not passion but evidence. The sheets in the hut, the sheets in the castle, both may be inspected for blood, both may be paraded as proof of virginity. The setting changes, but the humiliation is the same. What differs most starkly is memory. A peasant wedding may pass quickly into obscurity, recalled only by the couple's children, forgotten by the next generation. A noble wedding is inscribed into chronicles sung by poets, immortalized in letters. Yet both are prisons. The peasant bride becomes anonymous, swallowed by toil. The noble bride becomes famous, swallowed by expectation. In the end, neither is remembered for herself. One vanishes into silence, the other into spectacle. And so, whether you marry in a hut or a hall, surrounded by chickens or by courtiers, the weight is the same. The world cheers, the priest blesses, the feast roars. But beneath it all lies the same chain, the same trap. Marriage, whether muddy or gilded, is less about two souls joining, and more about systems consuming them. When you hear the bells, whether their sound drifts over a village green or a castle courtyard, you know what they truly mean. They are not songs of love, not promises of joy. They are the clang of a door closing, the echo of a prison made holy.